Welcome to FOSI Radio. We are broadcasting from the Christ University Central Campus, Bangalore. FOSI Radio is brought to you by the Department of Media Studies, Christ University. For all who are looking for a platform that focuses on communities, comments, climate, and communication, this is the place to be. What's more, this station is run by a diverse community of students and dedicated faculty members. Welcome back to another episode of Cli-myth Busters, a show where our own Dr. Kailash Kaushik asks the real questions behind the headlines. In this episode, we are exploring how effective individual action actually is in protecting the environment. Can we really reduce, reuse, recycle our way into saving the planet, or is there a better way to combat climate change? Stick around and find out as we explore the myths of individual climate action.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Kailash and welcome to Cli-myth Busters. This is your go-to show where we separate fact from fiction about climate, our environment, and everything that's connected between them. We are airing straight from our 4C radio headquarters at Christ University, Bangalore. On this episode, we shall try to find out why individual action, though vital, isn't enough to really save the planet and how collective action can truly get us closer to our climate goals. When it comes to solutions for climate change, we often hear the usual ones. Switch to LED bulbs, skip all the plastic straws, adopt straws made of palm, steel, or paper, cycle to work, consume sustainable fashion, switch to electric vehicles, go vegan, invest in the green economy. So many solutions you keep seeing on the media, on the TV, and all over the internet. And many of us have actually adopted these in our daily lives. There's one thing common among all these solutions though. Every one of these solutions are for the individual alone. For one person to change their behavior with the belief that it will impact the greater good of preserving Mother Earth. Our conversations on climate action are filled with individual behavioral change solutions that have moved the fight against climate change from the purview of justice to the purview of individual agency and consumption. But don't they say success is a sum of small efforts? And we want to be successful in arresting climate change. Won't all the individual small efforts lead us to success? Let's find out. Let's start with some facts. Individual actions are helpful, but there's a small catch. A recent research by the World Resources Institute shows that behavior change efforts targeting individuals achieve only about 10% of the predicted carbon reduction potential. Moreover, from the perspective of justice, climate change affects, impacts, and influences people differently, unevenly, and disproportionately, which means individual action cannot be generalized as a person who might cycle to work in New York City cannot be compared to a person who might be using a motorboat in the fringes of Manila. Obviously, it does sound very absurd to compare Prince Harry adopting eco-friendly fashion and expecting our local fishermen not to use a motorized boat. Look at this statistic. In 2023, the US per capita emissions were around 14.21 tons of carbon dioxide, while India's was around just 2.4 tons. So when you look at the per capita output, things take a very different hue. Now, even when you combine individual efforts with other structural changes like inclusion of solar panels or changes in diets, behaviors that could lower emissions by about 6.5 tons per person annually, real-world uptake is hampered always by a lack of supportive systems. Now that brings us to our next point. Individual actions always hit structural walls. You can pledge to cycle to work, but without safe bike lanes, it's impractical and it's dangerous. You might want to go vegan, but if local restaurants don't offer good options for that, your accessibility to protein is restricted due to multiple factors, and that's a huge barrier. What if your livelihood was based on making plastic bags? That's a major hindrance because it can stop your livelihood. What if you live in a place with barely any public transportation? Do we even have a chance to choose an alternative? Problems of the structure within social, economic, and political systems functioning not just in one country but world over becomes a major concern, especially in a connected, globalized world. Moreover, as critical thinkers, we cannot judge climate action without taking into consideration global history and the impact and influences of colonization. Now, add to such a globalized world private transnational monopolies competing and collaborating with local monopolies, local governments trying to attract foreign investments, all fighting for the dwindling natural resources while subsequently fighting for an expanding consumer resource. When market competition exists, we have to be aware of marketing campaigns that are presented in the garb of climate science. Case in point, British Petroleum. If you have felt guilty that your latest flight home might have increased your carbon footprint, worry not. In the same lines as the De Beers campaign that popularized diamonds, the carbon footprint was a PR initiative by the British Petroleum to divert the responsibility of saving the world completely onto the individuals and away from the oil giant itself. If you have kept in touch with the news in the last couple of decades, I'm sure you're aware of the multiple oil spills caused by British Petroleum. So, as an individual, you might know, or you might even clearly understand how big your carbon footprint might be, but working on your behavior alone to reach the numbers for a PR campaign might not deliver the results we had hoped for. For that, we need collective action. Let's get to collective civic engagement, like, pushing for public policy, infrastructure, or even community campaigns, and most importantly, just holding mega corporations accountable for their primary role in climate change and consequently hold the people in power accountable as to why they let the companies walk free. The World Resources Institute reminds us our civic footprint can reshape systems, not just one individual's carbon footprint. Collective civic engagement provides an alternative perspective of how we see each other. In the options stated earlier of individual behavior change, most need to be bought in the marketplace, or sometimes are the only options people have. Think of who uses a cycle for what. Now, if we are fighting climate change as consumers, that would not be enough. We need to fight climate change as citizens. As a collective of citizens, we need to fight for policies that ensure clean energy, invest in production and distribution of said clean energy, push for development of robust public transport systems, invest in infrastructure that facilitates and encourages cycling and walking instead of taking vehicles, lobby for policies that mandate green cover for cities, and most importantly, push for policies that allow citizens to hold people in power, be it in the government or be it in big business. So, you may feel good when you use a straw made of organic material, but remember, that's just a drop in the ocean. That is the huge fight that is climate change. Individual choices matter, but only when they are part of collective efforts. So, build that collective and let's fight climate change together. Let me conclude with the inspiring words of Chico Mendes, a Brazilian environmentalist who said, "Environmentalism without class struggle is just gardening." So there you have it. That's our verdict. And that's it for today's episode of Cli-myth Busters. I hope we busted some misconceptions and sparked some new thoughts. Share your thoughts in the comment section. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and family. And remember, question everything, especially when it comes to climate change. This is Kailash signing off. See you next time on Cli-myth Busters.
While our individual steps towards a better planet is noteworthy, we've got to roll up our sleeves and be a push towards real change together. Stay tuned for 4C Radio's upcoming episodes. Please write to us and follow 4C Radio on Instagram and X to stay updated. This episode was edited by Srinivas Aditya and illustrated by Varnika Singh. This podcast was researched and presented by Dr. Kailash Kaushik. 4C Radio is an initiative by the Department of Media Studies, Christ University, Bangalore.